Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere most stories about the Viking Age refuse to go, not to the roar of longships or the glitter of swords catching sunrise, but to what happened after the battle cries faded, when the sea carried not just treasure but people. You've seen the Hollywood versions, the armor, the fire, the myth of noble warriors and heroic raids. But what came next, the quiet aftermath, the fate of those taken, was something far more human and far more haunting. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where and when these stories reach you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The fire crackles in the distance as the smoke begins to settle. You can taste it on the air, ash, brine, and blood. The village is gone, reduced to splinters and embers. The tide laps quietly at the blackened shore, and through the haze you can still see the longships, their dragon heads watching the ruins like patient beasts. It's the year 875 AD, and somewhere along the Irish coast a Viking raid has ended. What comes next? Most stories skip. You stand amid the wreckage, a figure among the living and the dead. The cries have stopped. The air is heavy with silence, the kind that isn't peace but exhaustion. The Vikings are moving through what remains, slow, methodical, their boots crunching over charcoal and wet sand. They carry torches, sacks, ropes, and their eyes flick over what's left of the villagers, not with mercy, but calculation. You see them find the survivors. Women mostly, a few children, maybe an elder who couldn't flee fast enough. One by one they're pulled into the open, trembling in the firelight. The raiders don't rush. They speak to one another in low tones, assessing. In this moment, human life is a commodity measured in strength and youth. The weak, the sick, the too old are left where they fall. You watch a man lift a woman by the arm, turn her face toward the fire to see her clearly. She's terrified, but she doesn't resist. She's already seen what happens to those who do. His expression doesn't change. There's no cruelty in it, just practicality. He nods, and she's pushed toward a group of others being bound together with rope. The fire crackles again, and in its light you realize something that movies never capture. Raids weren't chaos. They were logistics. The Vikings weren't blood-drunk berserkers all the time. They were businessmen, soldiers, traders who saw opportunity where others saw tragedy. Every captured person was profit. Another set of hands to row, to farm, to serve, or to sell. Silver, fur, amber, and human beings. In their world, the concept of property included people, and that idea wasn't unusual for its time. What made the Vikings different was how far they took it. The fire's warmth reaches your face as you walk among the captives. Some cry, some stare into the dirt. One whispers a prayer in a language the raiders don't understand. Above them, the northern sky rolls with thick clouds, the stars swallowed by smoke. A few Vikings laugh nearby, passing a drinking horn, their beards still wet with sea spray. But others are quiet, sorting goods, binding limbs, speaking in calm tones that make the violence feel even worse. You can hear the distant waves now, and the sound of chains clinking faintly. Iron cuffs are being fastened, rough ropes tightened. The surviving men, few of them, are herded separately, guarded closely. The women are grouped by age and strength. The older ones are pushed aside. The younger ones, the ones who might survive the voyage north, are marked with scratches of charcoal on the arm. No one is screaming anymore. The terror has burned itself out, leaving something colder. Resignation. You can see it in their eyes. There's a point where fear becomes silence, and silence becomes endurance. The Vikings recognized that moment, and used it. You step closer to the shore where a few figures are loading sacks onto boats. Among them are the newly captured, tied, hunched, still shivering. One woman stumbles, and a man catches her roughly, not in anger but efficiency. They don't want her injured. She's worth less if she's broken. You hear one of them mention Dublin, another say Hedeby. You realize these aren't random destinations. They're slave ports, the backbone of an entire economy built on what no one wants to remember, that for all their sagas and gods, the Vikings were also slavers on an industrial scale. The sea breeze cuts through the smoke, sharp and cold. You can smell tar from the longships, the salt in the air mixing with the stench of blood. In the distance, gulls circle and cry. The captives are led toward the water, their reflections trembling on its dark surface. For them, this is the beginning of another kind of voyage, one without return songs or honor. The last torch is thrown down, the last roof collapses in a shower of sparks, and the longships begin to push off. The oars dip in unison, the rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. You can see the women sitting between the rowers, their heads low, bound hands tucked into their laps. The fire behind them flickers once more, reflected in their eyes like fading stars. As the ships glide into the night, you understand what's been erased from legend. The stories we tell about the Viking Age are full of conquest and adventure, but the truth rides on the same boats, in silence. The warriors go home with gold, yes, but also with people, and those people will never see their homes again. You watch until the last ember fades, and the sea swallows the horizon. The wind carries the scent of fire and salt, and in that cold, endless dark you realize the Viking world didn't end when the raid did. It began. The journey north is colder than you imagined. The sea is a grey monster, restless, endless, and biting through every layer of fabric and flesh. You're not a passenger, you're cargo, bound wrists, raw from rope, balance you awkwardly between the benches where the Viking rowers pull their oars through the frigid waves. You don't speak their language, but the rhythm of the oars tells you enough, steady, precise, unrelenting. This isn't chaos anymore, this is enterprise. It's the year 875 AD, and this longship is part of a convoy heading back to Norway after a successful season of raiding along the Irish coast. The men on board are seasoned, faces carved by salt and wind, arms corded with muscle from years of rowing and fighting. To them, the captives on the floor of the ship are spoils, proof of strength, trophies that breathe. They speak to one another with the calmness of men who've done this many times. You can tell by the tone this is routine. The air smells of pitch, sweat, and iron. The shields hanging along the gunwales rattle softly when the sea hits them. Every now and then a wave splashes over the edge, soaking fur and skin alike. The Vikings barely react. The captives flinch. You can hear muffled sobs carried off by the wind, but no one stops them. One of the older men glances over, not in pity, but to check that no one's dead yet. A dead captive is wasted profit. The horizon stretches forever. No land, just shifting grey. The rowers chant softly to keep time, voices deep and rhythmic. It sounds almost like prayer, but it's older, heavier. You find yourself matching your breathing to it. That's how survival begins here. Not through resistance, but rhythm. You learn the pulse of the sea, the creak of wood, the tone of commands shouted across the deck. You learn that mercy isn't part of the language. When the wind changes, they raise the sail, a square of wool dyed crimson and patched with leather. It bellows and snaps, and the ship surges forward. The captured women clutch each other for balance, their hair whipping into their faces. A few have already stopped crying. Their eyes are fixed on nothing, the first stage of endurance taking hold. It's a look the Vikings understand. They've seen it before. At night, the temperature plummets. Frost forms along the edges of the hull. The oars are pulled in, and the men huddle under heavy cloaks, drinking mead from horn cups. The captives are given nothing. No blanket, no food until dawn. A few are forced to sit near the oar benches to generate heat. The body is a furnace when used correctly, and in this world everything is used. One of the raiders, broad-shouldered, red-bearded, leans back and stares at the captives. His face isn't cruel, just detached. You see him glance at one of the women, then at another man, and there's an exchange, a nod, maybe a price, maybe a claim. You realize that ownership doesn't wait for markets. It begins here, on open water. The sea rocks the boat like a cradle, but no one sleeps well. You can hear whispers in different tongues, the occasional cry muffled by the sound of waves. Someone retches from seasickness. The smell of salt and vomit mixes with tar. The rowers, unfazed, keep rhythm when dawn breaks, backs glistening with cold sweat, their hair crusted with frost. You've entered a different kind of world, one where survival is measured by silence and obedience. After days, land appears, a jagged line of black cliffs rising from the sea. The air smells of pine and smoke, faint at first, then stronger. The longship glides toward a narrow inlet, the water calmer here, reflecting the dark slopes above. Other ships are already docked, their sails furled, their decks piled high with spoils. You can see figures waiting on the shore, women, children, old men. They don't cheer, they watch. They're used to this return. When the ship grinds against the rocks, orders are shouted. The crew moves quickly, unloading sacks of grain, barrels of mead, weapons, and, finally, people. You stumble onto land, legs weak, salt still burning your lips. The captives are lined up, their numbers counted, each assigned to a man or marked for the next market. Some are led away immediately, others tied to posts until dawn. The Viking who seems to command the group, tall with a wolfskin cloak and a silver arm ring, walks down the line, assessing each captive. His expression is as calm as a merchant's. He stops occasionally to lift a chin, examine teeth, hair, scars. He's not cruel, but he's thorough. When he finishes, he gives orders in a low tone, and the captives are separated into two groups. The stronger ones, mostly women in their 20s, are taken toward the longhouse at the edge of the settlement. The rest are led uphill toward smaller huts. You hear one man mutter a word you recognize. Thrall, the old Norse term for slave. That's what you are now. The Vikings didn't invent slavery, but they perfected its machinery. In this frozen world, a thrall could be traded for silver, for tools, even for favor among chieftains. Women especially were considered versatile spoils, workers, companions, concubines, commodities. As night falls, the northern lights ripple faintly above the ford. It's almost beautiful. This cruel world bathed in green fire. The longhouse glows at the center of it all, smoke rising through the roof vent, laughter drifting out. Inside, warmth and power. Outside, cold and silence. The divide is clear, ancient and absolute. You sit by the post, the rope cutting into your wrist, watching your breath curl in the icy air. The sea whispers behind you, endless and indifferent. The world here doesn't care about right or wrong, only ownership, endurance, and the quiet business of survival. The longships rest at anchor, their carved prows glinting under the aurora, and somewhere inside the warmth of the longhouse, deals are already being made, futures decided with the same calm voices that once ordered fire and death. For the Vikings, the raid never truly ended, it just changed form. By dawn, the fjord is still and silver, the mist low over the water like a veil. The smell of wood smoke drifts from the longhouse, mingling with the tang of salt and pine. Somewhere inside, men are already awake, talking, eating, dividing spoils. The long night of travel and conquest has turned into morning business. You can hear laughter echo faintly from the open doorway, but it isn't the laughter of joy, it's the sound of transaction. You stand near the shore among the other captives, ropes looped around wrists, watching the sun crawl up behind the mountains. The light is weak, filtered through the haze, but it still feels foreign, paler, colder, thinner than the sunlight of home. Around you, the settlement stirs to life, dogs barking, children running barefoot over frost, smoke rising from low huts. To them, this is normal. Raids come and go, ships return full or empty. It's all part of the rhythm. The tall man in the wolfskin cloak, clearly a chieftain, emerges from the longhouse. His beard is streaked with grey, his expression calm, unreadable. Two younger men follow him, carrying small pouches of silver and carved bone markers. They move along the line of captives, calling out words in Old Norse, pointing, sorting. One woman is claimed by a man who fought on the ship. Another is bartered for a piece of jewelry and a set of tools. It's quick, efficient. You realize this isn't cruelty, it's commerce. The Vikings called this system frahold, the keeping of thralls. Captivity was an accepted part of their society. A thrall might work the fields, tend livestock, haul wood, weave cloth, or warm a bed. Some were treated well enough to survive years. Others vanished in a single winter. There were laws that governed them, but the law in this place bends with the will of its masters. When it's your turn, you're pushed forward into the pale light. The chieftain studies you briefly, says something to his men. There's an exchange, silver rings, maybe 3 or 4 pressed into another warrior's hand. The deal is sealed with a nod. You're pulled aside and guided toward the longhouse, your feet slipping on the icy ground. You're not sure whether to feel relief or dread. Inside, the air is thick with smoke and the smell of roasting meat. The fire in the center burns hot, and the heat makes your skin sting. The walls are dark with soot, the rafters lined with hanging herbs, animal skins, and the gleam of iron. Around the hearth, benches hold men and women eating from wooden bowls, their laughter rolling like waves. You can feel every eye on you as you enter. Your new master sits near the far end, his hand wrapped around a mug of mead. He's younger than you expected, no more than 30, with the heavy build of a rower and a face marked by weather. When he looks up, his gaze isn't cruel, but it's sharp, calculating. He gestures toward a spot by the wall, near the sleeping platforms. You sit, careful not to meet anyone's eyes. Hours pass like minutes. The longhouse is alive with sound, conversation, laughter, the scrape of knives, the crackle of the fire. At some point you begin to understand the rhythm. The women of the household move constantly, tending the hearth, serving food, fetching water, weaving. You recognize a few by their bearing, free women, wives or daughters of warriors. The others move differently, quieter, more deliberate. They are thralls like you. Some wear simple wool, others rough linen, but none have jewelry or adornment. When one passes by, her eyes meet yours briefly. There's no pity in her look, only warning. You realize that survival here means invisibility. Speak little, move when told, and never draw the wrong kind of attention. Outside, the day passes slowly. Smoke curls through the roof vent, and the world turns grey again as the sun fades. You can hear the sound of axes in the distance, chopping wood for the night's fire. The cold seeps through the cracks in the wall. Somewhere, a child cries. The longhouse door opens, and the warriors return, boots thudding, voices raised. As night deepens, the fire burns lower. The freeborn women retire to the raised platforms near the chieftain's bed. The thralls settle along the edges, wrapped in whatever scraps of fur they can find. The hierarchy is visible even in sleep. Warmth and proximity to the fire define worth. You curl under a rough blanket that smells of smoke and wool. The murmurs of the longhouse fade slowly, replaced by the low hum of wind against the walls. The fire's last light flickers across the carved beams above, illuminating shapes, wolves, ravens, dragons. You stare up at them, the stories of the Norse gods twisting through your mind. Odin, Freyja, Thor, all these names that fill the sagas, yet none of them will remember you. You realize that in this world your story doesn't end with survival, it begins with disappearance. When sleep finally comes, it's not peaceful. You dream of waves, ropes, the endless sound of oars. You dream of the fire that devours, the smoke that chokes, and the eyes that never look away. And when you wake, the world is still dark, the fire reduced to coals. For a moment, you forget where you are. Then the sound of a Viking horn echoes through the settlement, and reality returns, cold, unrelenting, alive. The day begins again, as it will for years, until you forget the taste of freedom. The next morning comes without ceremony. The longhouse stirs before the first light touches the mountains. Someone adds wood to the hearth, and the smell of smoke and peat fills the air. You open your eyes to a world that feels both familiar and foreign. The same crackling fire, the same rough wool under your hands. But now you understand what this place is. It's not a home. It's an ecosystem built on obedience. Outside, frost glitters over everything. The fences, the thatched roofs, the frozen troughs. Breath hangs thick in the air like fog. The Vikings rise early, already dividing tasks. Men check the ships, mend nets, sharpen axes. The free women organize supplies, issue orders, and the thralls, your new kin, move quietly, almost invisibly, fetching water, lighting fires, grinding grain. Every motion is practiced, every sound subdued. The chieftain who owns you steps outside the longhouse wrapped in a heavy cloak. He doesn't look at you. Not yet. He calls for his men, gestures toward the coast, and within minutes they're gone, boots crunching across the frost. You're left behind with the others. A woman named Runner, older, strong in her movements, takes charge of the thralls. Her face is lined but calm, eyes as grey as the sea. She doesn't waste words. She points to a wooden pail, then to the frozen well outside. You understand. Work replaces identity here. It keeps you from thinking too much. You move through the settlement, the cold biting into your skin, the wind carrying the smell of smoke and salt. The other thralls avoid eye contact, their expressions carved into masks of endurance. You notice small scars on wrists and necks, the faint grooves left by ropes long gone. Every one of them carries history in silence. By midday, the sky lightens, though the sun remains hidden behind thin clouds. Inside the long house, the warmth returns, and with it, a strange rhythm. The freeborn women weave and talk softly, their fingers moving in perfect coordination across the looms. The sound of thread sliding through thread is hypnotic. A thrall stirs a pot of stew near the hearth. The scent is earthy, turnips, barley, a hint of meat. Hunger dulls fear. Later, your owner returns, stamping snow from his boots. He speaks to the others in clipped sentences. You don't understand all of it, but you recognize the tone. The raid season is over. Now comes winter, when work slows and households close in on themselves. For thralls, winter means confinement and proximity. That night, when the fire dims and the longhouse becomes shadows and breathing, the world feels smaller. The cold presses in through the walls. You hear shifting bodies, soft voices, the occasional muffled sob. A hand touches your shoulder. You freeze, heart pounding. You don't turn, but you know. This too is part of ownership. The sagas speak of warriors and gods, of honor and oaths sworn in mead halls. They never speak of this, the quiet thefts of dignity that happen in the dark. No one writes about the women who survive by becoming something less than themselves. But here, in the flicker of dying light, it's the unspoken truth. The next day, everything proceeds as if nothing happened. The fire burns, the looms clatter, the sea hums beyond the walls. Life doesn't stop for grief in this place. You see it in Runner's face. She knows, and she says nothing. She's been here longer than most, and endurance has become her language. She shows you where the water freezes thickest near the well, how to chip it away before dawn, how to stack kindling so the smoke doesn't choke you. These are lessons in survival, disguised as chores. Weeks pass. The routine erases time. The first snow becomes the second. The sun vanishes earlier each day, leaving only the fire to mark the hours. Sometimes, when the men drink and boast of their raids, you catch fragments of words, names of places, stories of resistance, laughter that never reaches their eyes. They talk about the captured women like goods, not ghosts. One night, a trader arrives from the coast. He brings pelts, amber, and a new shipment of captives. The longhouse becomes crowded, heavy with unfamiliar faces and fear. You see a girl, no older than 16, her wrists still bleeding from the ropes. She looks at you the way you once looked at others, wide-eyed, desperate to understand where she's landed. You lower your gaze, but not in shame. You know what she doesn't yet, that the only way to live through this is to become smaller than your fear. In the corner, the trader speaks in low tones with the chieftain. They exchange silver, furs, a small chest of coins. Deals like this happen often. But tonight the mood is heavier. You hear the word Rus, the eastern lands. Some captives will be sent farther, down the river routes toward Novgorod, where the markets are richer and the buyers many. The trade doesn't end in Scandinavia. It stretches through Europe like veins of iron. When the visitors leave, the longhouse is silent again. Only the fire speaks. You lie awake, staring at the smoke curling through the roof vent, thinking of the sea, of home, of faces fading from memory. The air smells of ash and wool, and for a moment you imagine what peace might have felt like before all this. But even that thought feels dangerous. In the dark, someone whispers a prayer, not to Odin, not to Thor, but to something quieter, older, nameless. A plea, maybe for the strength to wake again tomorrow, and you realize that in this frozen corner of the world, survival itself is an act of defiance. Outside, the wind howls, sweeping across the ford, erasing footprints, softening sound. Inside, the longhouse breathes slowly, a living body made of fire and fear, and under that breath, a truth hums quietly, constant as the sea. The Vikings conquered by sword, but ruled by silence. Winter deepens. The world shrinks to the size of the longhouse. Snow piles high against the outer walls, muffling sound, dimming light, erasing the outside world. The sea itself freezes at the edges, its slow tides breathing frost instead of foam. Days are measured by chores, nights by silence. You lose track of time because time here has no purpose. It is just survival stretched into months. Inside, the fire burns almost constantly, fed by thralls who sleep in shifts to keep it alive. Without it, the entire house would die. Smoke curls upward, staining the beams, coating the rafters in a layer of soot that turns everything the color of dusk. The air smells of wool, sweat, and smoke, a human scent heavy and constant. You've learned the rhythm by now. Grind the grain, fetch the water, mend the torn tunic, keep the embers alive. Each act becomes muscle memory, each silence a refuge. The other thralls move like ghosts beside you, quiet, efficient, invisible. Runner watches over everyone with the authority of experience. She can sense danger before it comes. The sound of a man's footsteps that means you should disappear. The tone of a laugh that isn't safe. You learn from her in fragments, not words, just awareness. When she speaks, her voice is low, even. Don't look too long at anyone. Don't speak unless spoken to. And if you can, learn their words. You do. Slowly, painfully. Not the sagas or songs, just the language of orders, fetch, grind, stay, kneel. Words of survival, not belonging. One evening, when the storm outside is fierce enough to make the walls shake, the chieftain holds a feast. The men return from a hunt with deer slung over their shoulders, their faces flushed from cold and drink. The air inside fills with noise, laughter, clashing mugs, songs about battle and bravery. The women of the household move through it all like shadows, pouring ale, slicing meat, refilling bowls. You keep your head low, hands steady. At the edge of the firelight, two men argue about the spoils of the last raid. Their words are sharp, then mocking, then dark. A name is mentioned, a woman's name. The laughter that follows isn't kind. You don't need to understand the words to understand the meaning. This is what the sagas never show, not heroism, but possession. Later that night, when the fire burns low and the feast is over, You see one of the younger warriors approach a thrall near the sleeping benches. His voice is soft, coaxing, but her body stiffens. Runner steps between them. For a moment it's tense, the air crackling like a drawn bowstring. Then he smirks, mutters something, and walks away. Runner's hand trembles only slightly when she turns back to the fire. You realize she's not fearless. She's simply too tired to be afraid anymore. Days bleed into nights, and nights into one long grey season. You start to understand the strange economy of this place. The Vikings measure value in endurance. The free are proud of their scars. The enslaved survive by hiding theirs. The sagas tell of warriors dying with honor, but here honor is a luxury. Survival is the only story that matters. Sometimes you hear snippets of the outside world. Traders come through, bringing rumors from far places of kings feuding in Denmark, of ships sailing to Byzantium, of a new market where the rivers meet in the east. You hear the word Miklagard, Constantinople, the golden city far beyond the forests and snows. For a moment it feels like another universe. When spring finally stirs, it's almost unnoticeable at first. The ice cracks faintly, water drips from the eaves, and the air smells faintly of thawed soil. But the settlement comes alive again. The ships are repaired, the axe is sharpened, and the talk turns to raiding season. The same men who laughed around the winter fire now polish their blades, eager for conquest. For them, violence is renewal. For the captives, it's the promise of another cycle. More loss, more displacement, more faces disappearing into fog. You see Runner standing by the water one morning, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Some come back, she says softly in her broken tongue. Some never do. Sometimes it's better not to. You know what she means. Freedom isn't a place anymore. It's an idea you visit in your sleep. That night, as the longhouse fills with the sound of sharpening steel, you lie awake on your rough bedding. The firelight flickers across the walls, turning the carvings into shadows that move like memories. You imagine the raids beginning again, the sound of oars, the crackle of fire, the screams that follow. But this time you're not watching from the shore. You're inside it, part of it. You realize with something like horror that the cycle doesn't just consume, it transforms. Every captive who lives long enough learns the rhythm of their captors, the habits of their households, their tongue, their silence. That's how empires spread. Not through gods or kings, but through assimilation born of fear. The Norse didn't only take lives, they absorbed them. When you close your eyes, you see 1,000 faces across 1,000 raids. Irish, Saxon, Frankish, Slavic, all blending into one endless silence under the same northern sky. Their names are gone, their songs forgotten, but their blood remains, flowing quietly through centuries. The fire pops. Someone stirs in sleep. You lie still, staring into the glow, realizing that history is less about what was written and more about who survived long enough to forget. Outside, the sea is thawing, whispering promises of open water. Inside, the longhouse breathes, alive with dreams no one will ever tell. And in that dim warmth, you understand that captivity doesn't end with chains. It ends when memory does. Spring comes not with warmth, but with motion. The Ford wakes first, the ice breaking in slow groans, fragments drifting like shattered glass across the grey water. Then come the gulls, circling above the longships as if they already smell blood. You hear the horns at dawn, echoing through the mountains, and with them comes the restlessness of men who have spent a whole winter waiting to raid again. The longhouse changes overnight. What was once quiet and closed becomes a hive of sound, hammers striking iron, ropes being coiled, shields polished, and laughter returning like a fever. The men move quickly, their faces alive with anticipation. To them, this is renewal, the sea calling them back to glory, to silver, to stories worth boasting about by next winter's fire. To the thralls, it's something else entirely. Raiding season means separation. Some will be taken along as servants or translators, others will be sold off to pay debts or reward loyalty. You see fear ripple through the ranks of the enslaved. They whisper quietly while they work, counting who might be chosen to leave and who will stay behind. In this place, even uncertainty is a kind of mercy. You haul buckets of water, sweep ash from the hearth, grind the last of the winter grain. The air smells of pine tar and seawater. Your body moves automatically now. No hesitation, no wasted energy. Every motion learned through repetition. Every glance measured to avoid attention. When evening falls, you step outside briefly. The horizon glows with a faint amber light, and the longships rest in the shallows like beasts waiting to wake. The carved dragon prows gleam with fresh paint, red, black, gold, reflections of power meant to terrify from miles away. Near them, thralls carry crates and bundles, watched by armed men. You know what's inside: grain, weapons, iron, furs, and sometimes people. A shout cuts through the noise. You turn and see a young thrall struggling under a crate too heavy to lift. The overseer strikes him across the back with the flat of a blade. The boy stumbles but doesn't cry out. He picks up the load again, trembling. You can't look away. The Viking world values strength, and mercy is weakness. Every bruise here has purpose. Every silence is survival. That night, the longhouse glows with firelight. The warriors drink and sing, their voices rising above the storm outside. The rhythm of their song is like the sea, rough, repetitive, eternal. The free women serve food and pour ale, their faces blank with practiced composure. You stand at the edge, unnoticed. It feels strange to see joy here, to watch them toast and boast, knowing that their glory is built on the bodies of others. Yet their laughter is real, their hunger honest. That's what makes it harder to hate them. They don't think of themselves as cruel, only victorious. Later, the chieftain speaks, his voice low but commanding. You understand enough now to catch fragments. They'll sail south, raid the coasts, perhaps even cross to Francia. The words hang in the smoky air like prophecy. The men cheer, the women nod in quiet resignation. The thralls exchange glances, each calculating the odds of survival. When the fire burns low, you hear the wind howling outside, slipping through cracks in the timber walls. You lie awake on your rough bedding, eyes tracing the orange pulse of the embers. Runner whispers near you, her voice almost gone from years of silence. When they go, she says softly, some of us go with them, some disappear forever, and some, she pauses, looking at the faint glow of the hearth, come back changed. You don't ask what she means. You already know. Every voyage remakes the world a little, just as every raid leaves a new absence behind. The next morning, the settlement gathers by the water. The warriors are ready, shields lined along the ships, weapons gleaming in the pale light. The air hums with excitement and dread. The chieftain gives orders, and the ships are loaded. A few thralls are pushed aboard. You see familiar faces among them. Runner is one. She doesn't look back. Her eyes are fixed on the sea, on something only she can see. When the oars dip into the water, the sound is hypnotic. The longships slide away, their dragon heads cutting through mist, their sails catching the rising wind. The songs fade slowly, swallowed by distance. The shore feels emptier than before, as if something vital has been taken with them. The remaining thralls return to work. Life continues. That's the cruel genius of this world. It never stops. Even as ships vanish over the horizon, fires must be kept, fields tended, food prepared. The silence after departure is heavy but not lasting. You hear laughter again by nightfall. Someone is always left to remember. Someone is always left to forget. Weeks pass. The sea begins to thaw completely. The ice melts into the rivers, carrying with it fragments of ash and wood from the winter fires. The fjord glimmers silver under the low sun. Sometimes at dusk you walk down to the water's edge. You imagine the ships far away, the same stars above them that shine here. You wonder how many of those aboard will return, and how many new captives will take their place when they do. You think of Runner and the others sailing into uncertainty. You think of yourself, anchored to this shore, part of a machine older and colder than memory. You know that history will never tell this story, the one written in bruises, in silence, in frost and firelight. But you also know something else, that endurance itself becomes a kind of rebellion. The wind picks up, carrying the faint echo of distant oars. You close your eyes and breathe. The sea smells like metal and memory, and in that moment you understand that survival is not submission, it's defiance written quietly across generations. Summer arrives with deceptive gentleness. The grass turns green again, wildflowers bloom along the cliffs, and the sun lingers well past midnight, pouring golden light over the fjord. The settlement looks almost peaceful from a distance, smoke rising lazily from the longhouse roof, goats grazing, children chasing one another through the grass. You could almost believe the darkness of winter never happened, but peace here is surface only. Beneath the laughter, the hierarchy remains as sharp as any blade. The men who stayed behind, too old or wounded to raid, take up work on the farms. You see them hauling nets, repairing fences, trading with passing merchants. The women manage households, weaving, spinning, preparing food, and the thralls move silently among them, as necessary as tools, as invisible as shadows. You spend your days tending to chores, your body hardened by repetition. You've learned to anticipate the moods of your owners, the subtle cues that signal danger, the way silence can precede violence as easily as laughter. You know which dogs bark before their masters return, which boards in the floor creak, which corners offer the brief illusion of privacy. Survival here isn't about strength, it's about reading the room faster than anyone else. Occasionally a trader arrives from the coast. He brings fish, honey, wool, and news. Each time he speaks of the raiders who sailed in spring, the longhouse falls silent. He says they've reached the English coast, that they've burned monasteries, that they've taken captives and silver. No one asks about Runner. No one ever does. The silence that follows is its own kind of mourning, though no one will call it that aloud. One night after the traders leave, the chieftain's wife, Inga, summons you. She's seated near the fire, combing her hair with a bone comb carved with spirals. Her face is stern, unreadable. She gestures for you to kneel and pours out a small cup of ale. She doesn't offer it to you. Instead, she looks into it as if scrying something only she can see. When she finally speaks, her words are low, deliberate. You catch fragments. Dreams, omen, blood on the shore. You don't understand her language completely, but her tone tells you enough. She's afraid, not of you, but of what the sea might bring back. You realize that even the free fear something larger than themselves. The Vikings live with their gods as intimately as with their ghosts. Later that night, thunder rolls over the fjord, rain lashes the roof, and the whole longhouse creaks under the weight of wind. You lie awake, listening. For a moment you imagine the ships returning in a storm, sails torn, oars breaking against the rocks. You imagine the sea claiming them as payment for all the lives it has delivered. But when dawn comes, the sky is clear again. The sea is calm, gleaming like polished iron. The world has moved on without vengeance. Days pass. The rhythm continues, work, silence, endurance. You notice changes in the air. Berries ripening, fish leaping in the shallows, ravens circling in pairs. Life insists on itself. Even here, the younger thralls begin to whisper about escape. You listen but don't speak. You've seen too much to believe in freedom as a destination. Then one morning, a shout echoes from the cliffs. Figures appear on the horizon. Black sails, glinting shields. The longships are returning. The entire settlement gathers by the shore. You watch as the ships glide through the water, sleek and monstrous, their hulls heavy with spoils. The men leap ashore, laughing, boasting, dragging barrels and sacks behind them. And among the cargo new captives, women and children bound, eyes wide with terror. You feel the weight of recognition, the echo of your own arrival a year ago. The same ropes, the same silence, the same cold, numb stares. You see yourself in them, an unending reflection passed down raid after raid, history repeating itself in human form. Runner isn't among the returned. You knew she wouldn't be, but still something in you aches at the confirmation. You scan the faces of those who survived. Their eyes are older, haunted. Some have scars that weren't there before. Others stare into the distance, already detached from the living. That night the longhouse fills with celebration. The warriors feast again, drunk on victory and mead. They sing of burning churches, of seizing treasure, of taking what was owed. You know what those words mean. For them, conquest is destiny. For their captives, it's damnation. The line between heroism and horror blurs until it disappears. One of the new thralls, a woman from the southern coast, is placed beside you. She trembles but doesn't speak. You offer her a piece of bread when no one is looking. She accepts it with shaking hands, whispering something in a language you can't recognize. You don't need to. The tone is the same as it's always been. Gratitude mixed with fear. As the feast grows louder, you feel the room tilt with heat and noise. Firelight flickers across shields and furs, the smoke twisting like ghosts above the crowd. The men roar their songs to the gods, but you can't hear the words anymore. You hear only the rhythm, the same steady beat as the oars, the same pulse as the waves, the same endless repetition of taking and being taken. You look around the longhouse and realize this is the real legacy of the Viking Age. Not glory, not exploration, but the normalization of ownership, the quiet machinery of domination disguised as destiny. The sagas forgot to mention this part because no one sings of the captives who kept the fires alive. Outside, the night glows faintly green with aurora. The fjord mirrors it perfectly, calm and endless. You step out into the cold air, the sound of laughter fading behind you. Above, the lights ripple like silent fire across the heavens, and you wonder if the gods ever watched this world with pity or only pride. The wind stings your face. The air smells of salt and iron. You close your eyes and think of the ocean, not as escape, but as witness. The sea remembers everything. It always does. Weeks pass after the ships return, and the settlement settles back into its rhythm, as if nothing extraordinary has happened, but something in the air has changed. The captives move differently now. Fewer cries, fewer fights, more silence. The seasoned thralls teach the new ones without words. When to lower your eyes, when to move, when to simply disappear. The longhouse is full again, heavy with bodies and heat, and the faint, inescapable scent of fear. The sea, meanwhile, keeps its steady whisper, washing against the shore as if indifferent to all that happens above it. You begin to understand the cruel logic of this world. Everything has its place. The free work to maintain their dominance, the enslaved work to maintain their lives. The longhouse becomes a self-contained universe of survival, each role defined, each breath accounted for. The new thralls, mostly women from the south, bring with them fragments of stories from other lands. When they whisper at night, their words are broken but vivid. Monasteries burned, villages sacked, entire coasts emptied. You listen in the dark, your mind filling with distant images of smoke and screaming. The Vikings call it conquest. The world beyond calls it devastation. Sometimes when the chieftain speaks, he calls the raids wealth voyages. He says the gods favor those who take what they can. You can hear the conviction in his voice, the unshakable belief that violence is sacred when it's done with purpose. And maybe he's right, because here belief itself is a weapon. But not everyone believes anymore. You can see it in the eyes of some of the returning warriors, men who laugh too loudly, drink too much, stare into the fire for too long. They've seen something out there, something the songs won't tell. Maybe they've started to realize that every treasure is bought with someone's scream. One of them, a man named Bjorn, limps when he walks. His arm was broken in the last raid. You see him often by the door, staring at the sea. He doesn't speak much, but sometimes he mutters to himself. One night, when the others are drunk and the fire burns low, you catch his words in fragments. Too many ghosts, too many eyes. He looks up, sees you, and his expression changes. Not cruelty, but recognition. He doesn't see a thrall in that moment. He sees what the sea has made of both of you, survivors of a machine too vast to question. In the following days, the trade ships arrive. Their hulls are deep and round, built for cargo rather than war. The merchants who step off them are dressed differently. Tunics dyed in foreign colors, hands heavy with rings. They speak in tongues that twist around the Norse language like vines. Their business is brisk, practiced. You recognize the same tone you heard on the night of your capture, calculation disguised as civility. The markets of the north run on more than silver and amber now. People are commodities. The traders examine the captives with the same cold efficiency the Vikings used. They check teeth, hair, scars, strength. Every gesture is the same. Turn, lift, nod, decide. You watch as two young women are sold, their wrists bound with rope. They don't scream. No one ever screams anymore. When the deals are done, the merchants depart with their cargo. The ships drift away into the haze, their sails catching the wind like pale ghosts. The longhouse grows quieter after they leave, but not calmer. The silence is heavier now, as if the walls themselves are tired of bearing witness. That night, Inga, chieftain's wife, sits by the fire alone. Her face is drawn, her hands busy with a small carving of a horse. You watch from the shadows as she works, her expression distant. When the carving is done, she places it near the hearth, whispering something you can't hear. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps an apology. You realize that even those who hold power here are prisoners of it. The system consumes everyone, only in different ways. Later, you lie awake, listening to the rain tapping against the roof. The longhouse breathes slowly, full of dreams and dread. You think about the women who were taken away, about the ones who stayed, about Runner who vanished into the sea's endless horizon. You think about how history will remember none of you. Not the fear, not the resilience, not the strange, silent dignity that keeps you moving. Outside, lightning flashes over the fjord, illuminating the ships at anchor, the dragon heads gleaming for an instant before fading back into darkness. The thunder rolls slowly, like the voice of some old, weary god. You wonder if the gods ever sleep, or if they too are condemned to watch forever. You drift towards sleep, the rhythm of the rain, syncing with your heartbeat. Somewhere in your half-dreaming mind you see the ocean again, not as it is, but as it remembers, full of faces, full of names swallowed by centuries. You realize then that the sea is the only historian that never lies. It keeps every secret, every scream, every breath that was stolen. When morning comes, the world is washed clean by rain. The air smells new, but you know it isn't. The cycle will begin again. Raids, return, trade, silence. The same song played on bones instead of strings. And as you stand by the shore, the wind cold against your skin, you whisper a single thought into the grey horizon, a thought no saga will ever write down. May the sea remember what men chose to forget. Autumn returns, soft at first, a faint bite in the air, a deeper shade of green in the grass, the smell of burning wood curling from every roof. The harvest begins, and with it comes the brief illusion of peace. Even here, in this world built on conquest, life still needs tending. The fields don't care about glory. They only answer to the patient rhythm of hands. You work alongside others in the cold morning mist, the soil dark and damp beneath your fingers. The sound of scythes cutting through grain echoes across the valley, steady as breath. The free and the enslaved move together now, not as equals but as necessity demands. The Vikings understand something the sagas rarely say aloud. Survival is communal. Even domination needs cooperation to endure. When you pause to stretch, you look toward the sea. The longships are drawn up on shore, resting after a season of blood and silver. Their dragon heads gleam faintly under the grey sky, patient, waiting for spring. You know what that means. Another winter of confinement is coming. The thought presses on your chest like a stone. Back in the longhouse, life takes on a new rhythm. The fire burns lower, slower, meals become smaller. The nights stretch longer. You notice the returning raiders are quieter than before. Their stories sound rehearsed, their laughter forced. Some drink until dawn, as if to drown something too heavy for speech. Bjorn, the limping warrior, spends most nights by the door. He's stopped singing entirely. Sometimes he sharpens his knife without using it, the metal whispering against the whetstone like a lullaby for ghosts. You've seen that look before, the kind people wear when they start to realize that the world they built has begun to eat them alive. One night, while the others sleep, Bjorn gestures for you to sit by the fire. You hesitate, but he doesn't move to threaten. He just stares into the coals and speaks quietly, words thick with drink but honest. He tells you about the last raid, about the monastery they burned, about the captives they took, about a child who clung to him and wouldn't let go. His voice cracks once, and he falls silent. You wait, unsure if you should speak. He doesn't look at you. "We all serve something," he says finally, "even those who think they command." He leaves the next morning before sunrise. No one sees him again. Some say he went east with traders. Others say the sea took him. You know better. Sometimes a man just walks far enough that history stops following him. Weeks pass. The fjord begins to freeze again at its edges. The first snow dusts the rooftops, softening everything into quiet. You feel the shift in your bones, that moment when time itself slows, and all that remains is endurance. The new thralls, those who survived the summer, are thinner now, hollow-eyed. A few are sold off before the deep freeze sets in. You watch them go without envy. At least movement still belongs to them. For the rest, there is only the fire and the work. You begin to forget your old name. In its place grows something wordless, an identity made of silence and repetition. One evening, the chieftain calls for a skald, a poet, from another village. The longhouse fills with people, faces flickering in the firelight. The skald begins his tale, his voice rising and falling like the tide. He sings of Odin's wisdom, Thor's hammer, Freyja's tears, of honor, courage, and the promise of Valhalla. The crowd listens raptly, eyes shining. You realize how easy it is to worship a story when you're not the one it erases. The poet's words are beautiful, but all you hear are absences. The songs never mention the women who wove the sails, the thralls who rowed the ships, the voices silenced beneath the weight of conquest. You wonder how many versions of truth can exist in the same world, how many times it can be told without breaking. Later, when the skald is gone and the fire burns low, Inga finds you near the doorway. She looks tired, not cruel, just worn thin by years of maintaining order in a world that devours itself. "Do you still dream?" she asks in halting speech, her eyes searching yours. You don't answer. She nods as if she expected that. "Good," she says softly. "Dreaming keeps ghosts alive." Then she turns away, her shadow stretching across the wall like smoke. That night, you do dream. You dream of Runner standing by the sea, her grey eyes calm, her voice whispering through the wind. You dream of chains turning to waves, of the longships sinking into the deep with no sound but the hiss of water swallowing wood. You dream of silence, not the kind made by fear, but the kind made by peace. When you wake, the dawn is blue and cold. Snow drifts through the open vent in the roof. The fire has gone out. For a moment you imagine what it would feel like to step outside, to walk into the snow, to let the sea take you where it will. But you stay, not out of fear, out of defiance. You will not vanish like the rest. You rise, feed the fire, and the world begins again. Smoke curling, breath clouding, footsteps echoing on timber. Somewhere beyond the horizon, new ships are already being built, new raids planned, the cycle continues. But as you move through the motions, something in you has shifted. You no longer see yourself as only a captive, you are a witness. The sea might keep the screams, the wind might carry the smoke, but you carry the memory, and that, you realize, is its own form of power. The world outside the longhouse remains frozen, waiting for spring. Inside, a single ember glows red in the ash. You stare at it until your eyes blur, until it becomes something else, the faint promise that stories, even the buried ones, never truly die. The last snow falls heavy and slow, blanketing the longhouse roof in silence. The fjord lies beneath a skin of ice, the mountains glinting under a weak sun that barely warms the air. The world feels paused, as if the gods themselves are holding their breath. This is the end of another Viking year, a circle closing, ready to begin again. But this time, something in you refuses to let it. You wake before dawn, the cold biting at your skin, the fire only a faint shimmer of dying coals. Around you, the others sleep, their breathing deep and uneven. You can hear the muffled sound of wind through the cracks in the timber, the long, low hum of the world turning. For a moment, you simply sit there, watching the faint glow of the embers and listening to the heartbeat of a house built on suffering. It breathes, it creaks, it remembers. Every plank, every iron nail, every ash-stained rafter hums with the weight of the lives it's held. When you step outside, the air cuts like glass. The snow crunches beneath your feet, each step a whisper against the hush of the morning. The village still sleeps, only the ravens are awake, perched on the posts, black against white, watching you with that sharp, patient intelligence that always feels ancient. The sea beyond the ice is silver, and still its horizon blurred into the pale sky. You walk toward the shore, the cold numbing your fingers, your breath fogging in front of you. The world is endless and empty, yet for the first time it doesn't feel like a prison. It feels vast, alive. You can smell salt and pine, the faint scent of firewood from the longhouse behind you. And somewhere in that mingling of smells you realize you've learned to love this world even as it's broken you. That's what the sagas never say. How even the conquered begin to belong, not to the conquerors, but to the land that witnessed them both. The water near the shore is still frozen, but thin. Beneath it you can see movement. Small fish shifting between cracks of ice, a slow pulse of light and shadow. The sea hasn't forgotten. It never does. Every year it carries the ghosts of raids, of screams, of ships and souls swallowed whole. And yet it's still beautiful. Terrible, yes, but beautiful. Behind you the longhouse door opens. Inga steps out, wrapped in furs. Her hair is streaked with frost. She looks at you for a long moment, her breath visible in the air. "You miss home," she says softly in broken words. You nod. She looks toward the sea, her eyes distant. "So do I," she murmurs, so quietly you almost don't hear it. Then she turns and disappears back inside, leaving only the echo of her steps and the soft creak of the door. You stand there for a long time, staring at the horizon, wondering what home even means anymore. The one you lost is gone. The one you've lived in was never yours. But the thought doesn't hurt as much as it once did. Somewhere deep inside, something colder and stronger has replaced it. Endurance carved into you by fire, frost, and time. As the day brightens, life stirs again. Smoke rises from chimneys. Children's laughter drifts faintly from the fields. Dogs bark, their sound sharp against the frozen air. The same world, the same cycle. And yet, you feel a shift, a small rebellion under the skin of everything. You're still here, still breathing, still remembering, and memory, you realize, is the one thing they can't own. You return to the longhouse. The warmth hits you slowly, wrapping around your chilled body. The others are awake now, tending the fire, preparing the day's food. You move among them without speaking, your hands steady, your breath calm. Outside, the wind picks up again, brushing snow from the roof. It sounds almost like the sea, far away but calling. When night falls, the fire burns bright again, shadows dancing across the walls. You sit near the edge of the hearth, watching the light shift and fade. Someone hums softly in the dark. A melody you don't recognize, but it's soothing, human, real. For the first time in months, you let your eyes close without fear. You dream again of the ocean, but this time there are no chains, no fire, only the slow rhythm of waves against a distant shore. You see faces in the water, Runner, Bjorn, the nameless ones who came before. They don't speak, but their silence feels like peace. You realize the stories of this world won't end in the sagas. They live here, in whispers, in bones, in blood, carried forward quietly by those who endured. When you wake, dawn spills through the cracks in the wall. The fire has burned low, but it still glows. You breathe in the warmth, slow and steady, and the world outside hums with the promise of another cycle beginning. You rise, take the first step of another day, and in that motion is everything: grief, strength, memory, defiance. Because even here, in the cold heart of history, where the powerful sleep on furs and the powerless fade into legend, life continues. And in that continuation lies something sacred, something the gods themselves might envy. Not glory, not conquest, just endurance. The fire burns low, a last quiet pulse of orange in the dark. Smoke drifts upward in lazy spirals, soft and fragrant with pine, disappearing into the beams above. The longhouse sighs in its sleep, the faint crackle of wood, the murmur of breath, the distant whisper of wind slipping through the seams. The world outside is frozen and blue, but in here, time has thinned into something gentle, something almost kind. You can feel it, the weight of centuries pressing lightly on your chest, the stories, the suffering, the lives folded into silence, all of it. Now just a low hum beneath the rhythm of your own heartbeat. The past no longer shouts, it murmurs, it exhales. You picture the sea again, wide and endless. Its surface glows under the pale northern light, silver and soft as memory. You see the ships that once carved through its skin, their oars rising and falling, carrying both victors and victims into legend. But the sea doesn't judge. It only keeps their echoes. It carries them gently, rocking them into sleep. Inside the longhouse, the last ember dims. The cold presses close, but it doesn't hurt anymore. The air is thick with warmth that isn't heat. It's the warmth of endurance, of everything that survives when names and nations fade. You take one long breath, slow and deep, letting it fill you with stillness. The world narrows to that single sound. Your inhale, your exhale, the fire's fading sigh. Outside, the snow falls again, soft, endless, forgiving. And for a moment it feels like the whole world is resting. The fire flickers once more, then folds into darkness, quiet, complete, eternal, like a candle going out.